Okay, so the last topic in this building blocks discussion about music theory is the concept of intervals. So intervals describe the distance between two blocks. So a block in and of itself is not an interval. An interval is the distance between the blocks. And we're talking about the distance between any of the notes. So if I was to say the interval between E and F is whatever it's going to be, and I'll describe that. But there's also E to A, that's a different interval. It's a larger interval. This is a smaller interval, and it's based on distance. Okay, so the smallest interval that we have in Western music is called the half step. I don't know why they decided to do that, but it's called the half step. So a half step is the distance between two blocks. So if you're going from one block, the block that you're considering to be the starting place for the measurement of the interval, you choose that block, and then the distance to the next block adjacent to it, either up or down. It doesn't matter if you're talking from E to F or F to E, the interval is still a half step. And if we're talking about guitar, this is just the distance of going from one fret up to the next fret, or one fret down to the next fret. That is a half step. Okay, so I just have a couple examples illustrated here. So we've got the distance from block 1 to 2, that's a half step. The distance from 6 to 7, that's also a half step, because we're just talking about a jump from one block to the next. And again, it does not matter if you're going 7 to 6 or 2 to 1 or 9 to 10, it's still a half step. You could make the distinction that it's a half step up or a half step down, but it's still a half step. And so here, I just have some letters representing the notes instead of just numbers. You can see A sharp to B is a half step, or B to A sharp, same thing, it's a half step. Okay, so the next biggest interval that we have in Western music is the whole step. And the whole step is twice the distance of the half step. So you can consider it as the distance between the first and the third block, or the seventh and the ninth block. And it can get kind of confusing in my mind, like the concept of repeating a word over and over again until it doesn't make sense anymore. So when you say like this distance is 3 blocks, I mean, it's 3 total blocks, but I guess the distance is actually 2 blocks because you're considering this to be your starting block. So in your own mind, like choose how you like to think about that. But all you need to know is a whole step is if you're playing on fret 1 and you go to fret 3, so you skip fret 2 and you go all the way to fret 3, that is a whole step. Okay, so the same thing applies. You can be going from block 1 to block 3 or 3 to 1. It doesn't matter which direction you're heading, it's still a whole step. But again, you can make the distinction that it is either a whole step up or a whole step down. And this applies to the blocks in any location on the chromatic scale, 7 to 9, 12 to 10, doesn't matter. And so here at the bottom, I've got letter values, so you can see the same thing applies. So going G to A or C to A sharp, that's a whole step, because there are 3 total blocks and you are moving in either direction. Okay, so we can expand this concept and grow it, because obviously you can move more than just a half step or a whole step. And you can start to think about this as 1.5 steps. So here's your whole step, and then here's your half step. So that's 1.5 steps. Or it could be 2 steps. Here is 1 whole step, and then here is your second whole step. And you'll notice that the last block of your first whole step becomes the starting place for the next interval, the next measurement. And this goes up 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. And each one of these intervals has a different name for it. And we will get into that, but just to kind of give you a sneak peek, this is called a minor second. This is called a major second. This is called a minor third. This is called a major third. And it goes all the way up until you hit the octave. Actually, it even goes further. But again, that's a subject for a different discussion. So the key takeaways, let's go back. The key takeaways, and I'll go backwards here. So the key takeaway for the discussion about intervals, the smallest one is a half step, and it is the distance between 2 blocks. There is no intermediate. The next step bigger is a whole step, and it's the distance. It's 3 blocks total. You're skipping one. And you can grow intervals larger, 1.5 steps, 2 steps, etc. So those are the main takeaways for intervals. Inharmonic equivalents, that the notes that have these symbols, it looks like a lowercase b or a number sign. This is pronounced G flat. This is pronounced F sharp. These are inharmonic equivalents. They are the same note, but there is a different name for each of them. And you can see that they reside between their natural neighbors. So a natural note is a note that does not have a symbol after it. And a note that does have a symbol after it, doesn't matter which one it is called an accidental. All right, and then lastly, back to the very beginning of what we discussed, Western music, all Western music is comprised of only 12 notes, but in various octaves that repeat in ad infinitum. Again, I don't know, is that the right phrase? All the way up or all the way down. And what I've done here is I've just taken a single cycle of that infinite pattern chain in both directions and laid it out. And the reason why it says 1 here is just to illustrate the fact that it repeats. And so if I was to continue, this would be 2, 3, 4. Or if I went down, this would be 12, 11, 10. And if you assign letter names to them, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. There's no accidentals between E and F or B and C. They go right into each other. And if you were to look at a piano, if you're familiar with the layout of a piano, you would see that the black keys are the accidentals and the white keys are the naturals. And on a piano, the E and the F are where you have 2 white keys next to each other. But then to the right of the F, located above, there's a black key in between the F and the G, which are both white keys. And so if you can picture a piano, well, here, let me pull one up. I'm going to show you a piano, and you'll see that a piano is nothing more than the chromatic scale laid out visually. That's why piano is just such an awesome and cool visual aid to imagining music. Okay, so pull it up here. Got my 2 screens going here. I feel like I'm in a space shuttle. Okay, so if you look at the piano here, you can see that there are no accidentals between E and F and between B and C. And here you have the accidentals between F and G. So you've got F sharp / G flat. And again, remember that these are inharmonic equivalents. They are the same thing, although they have a different name. There's G sharp and A flat, A sharp and B flat, C sharp and D flat, D sharp and E flat. So if we go back to the image of the chromatic scale, here we have it. No E sharp or F flat. So these would be two white keys next to each other, and no B sharp or C flat. These would be two white keys between each other. All right, cool. So this can seem pretty, well, it can seem pretty complicated. It seems like there's a lot to know. And a lot of times it can seem pretty dry. And if you're just like, I want to rock, I just want to play music, I don't need to know this crap, I would challenge you to learn it, because I believe that knowing this stuff can enrich your musical experience so much. There's an analogy that I like to use with my guitar students, and the idea of just playing by ear. If you've got a good ear and you're just like, I just write and play by ear, I don't need to know the names of the notes, I don't need to know why certain chords are built the way that they are, I don't need to know what's going on under the hood theoretically with music, I just want to play it by ear. I consider that to be the equivalent of traveling from point A to point B in a subway. You just go in, you get there fast, you're underground, you see nothing on your way there, and then you get up and you're at the location. You're playing the song you want to play. But knowing music theory and what's under the hood, I consider to be the equivalent of getting from point A to point B, but walking there and looking around you to see all the things and the sights around you. And if you live in a city for a while and you only take the subway, you can get around by subway. But if you're walking and you end up in some place, you don't know where you are. But knowing music theory enables you to fill in the gaps between these stops. It enables you to feel confident that you know where you are, and it gets you your bearings, and it helps you to understand certain things about music that you wouldn't understand if you just played by ear. And it's those connections that I find to be so rewarding and so cool. So that's why I took it on myself to learn this stuff, and why I encourage my guitar students to learn this stuff too. And I found that there's a certain like light that happens in their eyes when they understand something, especially when they're playing a song further down the line and they recognize certain theoretical concepts in the song. They're like, oh, that's why this is the way that it is. And there's just this sense of enjoyment that is present when you know what's under the hood, as opposed to just playing by ear. So I hope you found this helpful, and feel free to hit me up if you got any questions, james@forestparkdiy.com, and I'll get back to you. All right, happy playing.